Hello, everyone, again, and welcome to this panel on the industrial metaverse and looking at the question on how do we foster innovation. And I'm very excited today to bring to you a stellar panel of industry, not just specialists, but true leaders in the field that are making the industrial metaverse happen. My name is Simona Lipstaite. I am the head of Europe at Access Partnership, which I will introduce in a few moments. But welcome everybody, and welcome to those that have just joined in the last few seconds. Today's topic is really about the industrial metaverse, which has been identified as a game changer for how people design, manufacture, and interact with physical entities across different industries. So, for example, we look at car manufacturers like BMW that has created a digital version of its upcoming electric vehicle facility in a move that, I guess, exploits the value of metaverse for large manufacturing projects. And also the phenomenon of digital twins, which allows for full-scale testing in a sandbox environment, identifying issues, working through those issues, anything from floor layouts to validating the assembly process before even creating the physical counterpart. So really working through the potential and the challenges before anything is even created in the real world. Now, we obviously at Access Partnership work with many companies on the metaverse as well, in different aspects of the metaverse. And what we've noticed is that many prominent leaders, companies in the field, say that they see even more potential in the industrial metaverse as opposed to some of the other more kind of private customer-based metaverses. Although maybe that it's not always translated so easily in the mainstream press, etc., that focuses on exciting new hypes, headsets, etc., that people can buy and use at home. So we're hoping that today we will be able to delve into some of those issues, and our experts will describe much better than I ever could on what the use cases for the industrial metaverse is. We will also look, of course, not at just the opportunities. We will also look at some of the not insignificant challenges that still need to be addressed. For example, scalability, reliability, low latency, connectivity, and the energy requirements for those immersive industrial experiences. And also, I'd very much like the panel to touch upon the governance perspective. So how do we foster an industrial metaverse that promotes innovation while also respecting individual privacy and making sure we provide an inclusive, collaborative, and interoperable platform? Access Partnership, for those who have not come across us before, we are a technology and digital policy consultancy working in several places around the world, and very much marrying our policy expertise with our technological engineering and compliance expertise to work both with industry but also with governments on technologies new and old, and certainly metaverse being some of the newest and most innovative type of technology. Now, I would like to remind everyone that you can submit questions through the chat box, and then hopefully we'll have time to pose as many of those as possible when we come to the Q&A section of the panel. Let me pass over, first of all, to Alex Chalent, who is the CEO and co-founder of Resonance, which is the parent company of Metaverse Insider. Metaverse Insider is the leading metaverse publication and intelligence platform. Alex, if you wouldn't mind also introducing yourself in a little bit more detail. I know that today you're going to talk about some thoughts about the industrial metaverse more generally, but also some of the most exciting new platforms and services that you're launching. So over to you, please.
Great, thank you so much, Simona. And hopefully everyone can now see the screen I'm sharing. So look, background on myself, I used to be a technology investor, a private equity fund, and I built Resonance, which provides leading market intelligence on emerging technology markets, for example, quantum, space technology, and indeed what we're talking about today, the metaverse. And so I'm very excited to hear from the real experts in the room, our panel of industry experts. Before we do that, I just wanted to take 3 minutes to talk about what we're seeing in the market and frame our interest in the industrial metaverse, which is the topic of focus today. So I'll kind of start. So I think let's be honest, if you look at the headlines, we're really in the era of the whateververse. I think the Wall Street Journal called it the metaverse. And really, why is that? Well, I think there's one key challenge at the moment, which is there's been another area of hype. And you're seeing this a lot on the kind of people who are posting a lot on LinkedIn is the metaverse experts are retreating and the AI experts are coming out. And you've also got the fact that you're seeing some relatively negative headlines, as was previously alluded to. In our engine, we're tracking the reach and sentiment and types of news that are coming out. And it's hard not to miss that there's obviously a degree of negativity that's coming about around the metaverse and its current success. And what I'd like to frame is it really so bad? And how does this connect to the industrial metaverse? And so we really track the underlying trends of what's going on in the metaverse industry. So what we do is we have a massive graph database. We connect every end user of metaverse or immersive technologies. We track every startup, every government policy lead, and we connect it up and see the relationships in this market. And when you can do all that, you start to see some interesting underlying trends. Now, the first one, which will be obvious to many, is the metaverse is not just NFTs or crypto. There's a whole integrated supply chain and interconnected ecosystem with some of the largest corporates, like we're speaking to today, who are really pushing forward with genuinely innovative and really exciting technology. The funding round situation is also quite interesting. There was a huge boom in 2021 and 2022. But a lot of this was driven by marketplace and blockchain platforms. There's a lot of stuff going on in the background, and you should look at the kind of total weight of funding that is going into the broad metaverse market. We're talking billions of dollars. Just keep in mind, I also look at other industries like quantum and space, and I can tell you that the weight of capital going into the broad metaverse market is absolutely enormous. And indeed, the funding rounds, the number of funding rounds that are happening in this market continue to be very high. So I'm just going to also jump into a couple of case studies to really try and unpick, are we really seeing the level of negativity that you may take from the headlines? So first, I'm going to zoom out on Meta as a case study. We've seen significant growth in employee count in Meta over the last 10 years. The headlines are about layoffs and there's rumors of more, but really what we're seeing is a step up from 6,000 people to over 70,000 people. This is an industry which is having to be careful in the emerging technologies like AI, but it's one that is still very much alive and kicking. Again, be careful of the headlines. If you actually zoom in now on Meta, there is engineering people and relevant people for the metaverse who are being part of the layoffs, but this is not just a metaverse cut. We are looking at a difficult economic situation across the board. And so we just should keep that in mind. So where is the momentum behind the headlines? Well, I've just listed a few here, but I would really like to underpin that a lot of this stuff is the real underlying industrial use cases of immersive technologies. It's being able to build a digital twin of an industrial process to identify where we can make improvements. It's being able to augment challenging engineering approaches and even surgeries. And this is where we're really seeing proper engagement and exciting use cases. So with that, I would love to hand back over to our moderator and our fantastic panel. And I'm really looking forward to understanding a little bit more around where we're seeing innovation in the industrial metaverse. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Alex. And indeed, looking forward to discussing some of those questions that you raised. Let me introduce the panel because that's why we are here. So I'll do a very quick introduction. And again, it would be great if you could elaborate a little bit and talk about your experiences as well. First of all, I'd like to introduce Dr. Volker Ziegler, who is the Senior Technology Advisor and Chief Architect at Nokia. Volker is a leader in the telecoms industry. He has absolutely championed the significance of the metaverse-ready networks and the role of 6G systems. I'll quickly go through the rest of the panel and then come back, Volker, to the introductory remarks. We also have with us today Simon Bennett, who is the head of innovation and incubation at Aviva, who was also the global head of research. Simon has been instrumental in building and implementing Aviva's strategy for research and development, and he's now leading the Global Technology Research Program, including partnering with some of the world's leading universities on the issue. Also, welcome to Greg Demchak, who is the Senior Director for the Digital Innovation Lab at Bentley Systems. Greg is a pioneer in the industrial metaverse, especially in the software development and digital innovation side of things. He directs research and development in digital twin technology for the built environment, and also works as technical architect, developing mixed reality solutions and working prototypes for the construction industry. So very excited to hear all about the details that we really wouldn't get from anyone else on the metaverse and industrial metaverse. And finally, huge pleasure to introduce Mathieu Worm, who is the Senior Principal Key Expert for Simulation and Digital Twin, and also Research and Development at Siemens. Mathieu has been leading on Siemens's research and technology roadmap, which enables digital twin applications while continuing to develop new ideas and concepts for the future. So working with everything from cutting edge technologies like autonomous vehicles and again, digital twins, which several people have already mentioned today. So let me first pass on to Volker, who I know has also a few slides to run through, but generally I would ask that each participant spends kind of 2 to 5 minutes on introductory remarks, and we will go in the order in which I introduced everyone. And maybe if you would like to delve also a little bit on what is the definition of the industrial metaverse for you individually, because actually as we were doing some of the prep for this webinar, it turns out not everybody has the exact same definition. So very interesting to see how different companies and people are interpreting it. But over to you, Volker, looking forward to the presentation.
Thank you so much, Simona. Let me just share. Can you all see this?
Yes.
Excellent. So thanks again, Simona. Ladies and gentlemen, this is about industrial metaverse. In the next 4 or 5 minutes, I indeed am delighted to share with you all a couple of thoughts from Nokia Bell Lab side in terms of what does it take to enable the industrial metaverse, the path to 6G, the next generation of networks being a key enabling factor, and maybe also, Simona, taking a shot at answering your key question, like what is the industrial metaverse to begin with, taxonomy. So we have a clear vision of the industrial metaverse, and in the big picture, the way we would frame this, and we have consistently framed it, and I think it's powerful, it's consistent, is that we have the concept of 1, digital physical fusion, and 2, human augmentation. These are the 2 defining factors, enablers at the same time. So connecting the worlds, if you like, digital, physical, and human biological world. And then associate attributes, of course, that go with digital physical fusion would include digital twin, 3-dimensional, but also powerful parameters of performance and capability, building on next generation networks such as sensing. When you look at human augmentation, of course, extended reality, interoperability comes to mind, powerful theme in itself. And of course, to say this up front, 2 things, right? We have current generation of networks still evolving, 5G advanced, a lot of good progress, a lot of digital twins already in action. And by the way, there's a lot of cool things now happening the next couple of years. Think of 5G advanced and the symmetry of uplink, downlink capability as an example for mobile extended reality use cases. But of course, in the 30s, then we will see full-fledged potential. This is about technology convergence. So you could say we motivate all this from a industry pull angle, but also from a technology push angle. So what are the key technologies enabling the metaverses? We maybe can discuss this more on the panel. So clearly devices, XR, extended reality, glasses, new form factors coming up, networks, 6G in the 30s. Also, we should mention fiber connectivity as well. Not everything is mobile. AI ML is right at the heart of this. And then, of course, you have a range of software technologies, cloud, disaggregated architecture, Web3, blockchain, all of these enabling the metaverses. What are the opportunities about? Now, the opportunity, the big one we want to discuss today, and I think it's exciting we do it, is industrial metaverse. So this is operations time-centric, and this can be, if you like, differentiated as a high-level taxonomy from consumer metaverse and enterprise metaverse. Enterprise metaverse, just to be clear, is more IT-centric. Of course, there's many cases where you'd have both elements of IT and OT, and some folks argue there's also an element of convergence around that. Now, is the opportunity real? Yes, it is. Right-hand side of the chart, you've probably already seen it. A lot of growth expectation in the next couple of years, and clearly industrial automation focus, a lot of good early traction. And by the way, according to some of the analysts, higher traction than what we would expect the same time frame from consumer side. With this, let's have a very quick look at the revolution and evolution for the industrial metaverse. And here, not surprisingly, I want to highlight the aspect of specialized networks as a key enabler for what will be, what already is today, typically localized, specialized solutions for truly mission-critical performance, right? So these scenarios, they are not like nationwide, they are truly localized, and that's where the key value is. And what you see here on the chart is an attempt at looking at what will happen this decade versus what is around the corner next decade in the 2030s. And when you look at some of the performance attributes and the increase in performance, like what is that goes beyond what we can do with 5G, with 6G in the 30s, just indicatively, you see a number of key elements of radical change, revolution, as some people would call it. There is this idea, and I need to go fast since we only have 5 minutes for this for these opening remarks, but there is this cool idea of building networks that would both not only allow you to communicate, but to also sense, same network infrastructure. Of course, increasing bit rate at short ranges, high speed, extreme latency reliability, and you can compare on the lower part of the chart, like where we would go beyond what 5G will do, even though 5G will already carry us some way forward, right? So there is the theme of clearly, yes, capacity and peak rate. There is themes of safety, security, surveillance, positioning, and sensing. Then the architectural side, distributed computing, automation. And of course, last but not least, this whole space of scenarios, very exciting about dynamic digital twins and not just virtual worlds, but virtual worlds in particular as well. So with this, just to make this real last slide before I hand back over to you, Simona, just briefly, maybe one example. Now, I deliberately chose actually the example from the Finnish north. I know there's some Finns on the audience, so you may or may not have visited the Oulu factory. It's the conscious and metaverse ready site of Nokia. We have actually a couple of them, but Finland stands out in terms of truly leading the charge. And when you look at what it is, it's pretty powerful because one, it's real today, and there's a number of building blocks that kind of tie into metaverse readiness and consciousness. So there is this notion of new product introduction in a virtualized fashion, private wireless network being an integral part of this. Why is wireless so important? Because it allows you to utilize assets without cable and the flexibility that come from that. So very flexible robotics, high productivity. What I can also mention up front is the agility, time to market, and of course, all of this in a real-time process environment that also seamlessly links into digital twin enabling of the distributed cloud-based architecture. With this, back over to you, Simona. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Volker, and excellent presentation materials. Let me pass over to Simon, please.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity, everyone, for this discussion. My name's Simon Bennett. I'm Director of Innovation and Incubation at Aviva. We are a 100% owned subsidiary of Schneider Electric, but we are a software-only company, and it's our goal to present an industrial intelligence as a service offering to our customers. Our customers are pretty much in most industries, so from manufacturing, power, energy, mining, metals, all of the kind of larger industrial sectors, if you like. We're a 50-year-old company, and we've been in the business of giving information management services to our customers all that time. So from a definition perspective, let's start with the simple one. In our view, we see the industrial metaverse as a collaboration layer on top of a digital twin. Nice and simple, a place where people can meet in order to interact with all of the information that they have in their digital twin. A slightly more verbose version might be that it's a persistent virtual environment for us to behave together with live collaboration. We don't care whether you're using headsets, tablets, or PC or mouse. It's not about the interface device for us. It's about people being and working together. We absolutely are confident that our customers need every single data source, so there shouldn't be any limit to where their system's information comes from. But of course, it has to be enterprise level because of intellectual property and management of information. So it's enterprise level role access, if you like. And in our view, they need to be able to gain access to real-time operations data streams from any of their SCADA or MES systems during a manufacture or process, and also all of the up-to-date engineering data that they might have used to create that asset. So that's me.
Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to the discussion. Next, we will pass over to Greg, please.
Yes, hello, my name is Greg Demchak. I'm with Bentley Systems. I run our digital innovation lab with a focus on the metaverse. And if you're not familiar with Bentley Systems, we provide software to the global infrastructure industry. So that's, talk about industry infrastructure. It's literally the engineers, architects, builders who are building the world's core infrastructure, the bridges, the highways, the roads, the electrical utilities, airports, buildings, etc. All that physical architecture that sustains life. And in terms of our view on the metaverse, we've been really shifted away from a cloud, a file-based workflow into a cloud-enabled workflow, where these super rich, detailed 3D engineering models that are being authored by engineers can find their way into metaverse experiences via a direct link into game engines, for example. And to kind of follow up on the previous point, that can be an interaction with a VR headset, with a mixed reality headset, on a tablet, on a desktop. And sort of the value we see that the metaverse bringing is this ability to have multi-user collaboration in real time with real-time interactive graphics and accessing these rich 3D models and providing feedback loops. So I think the industrial metaverse for us is actually, it's practical. It's a way to extend the value that our customers are already investing in the development of intelligent 3D models, building information models, and bringing that investment to the next level of human-computer interaction via metaverse technology. That's very high level. That's what we're exploring, and space of what we might call the infrastructure metaverse. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Greg. And finally, very excited to hear from Mathieu for the introductory remarks.
Thanks. Yeah, so I'm Mathieu Worm. I'm in Siemens Technology, the central research and development organization of Siemens in the technology field for simulation and digital twin. I dial in from Belgium, from Leuven, and I have a background in both software and hardware in the context of simulation. When it comes to industrial metaverse, I think we are very close in the definition to what Simon brought up as ingredients of what an industrial metaverse creates. So we define it as a space to experience digital twins with high levels of immersion, with high levels of interaction, with high levels of collaboration, and finally with persistence. So the data that is in there remains there and can be updated over time by different people contributing to that data. I think what's important is that the true value of an industrial metaverse will appear when we are able to make it a seamless transition along different people working in the product lifecycle. So during the design, engineering, manufacturing, and usage of products, but also in the supply chain, getting from parts to components to systems to integrated systems to full plants, manufacturing plants, even global environments can be part of that. And lastly, if we are able to ensure that we start off with digital data, as there is no real data yet, and over time be able to enrich that virtual data with real data. So there's a couple of axes that are typically time-bounded axes, where an industrial metaverse is able to take away the individual silos that we see there today, opening up massive opportunities for reuse, for enrichment of work that is done at an earlier stage and being evaluated at another location or time in that process. So the true value comes when we are able to connect that all. And in the meantime, we look for the use cases where we can make sort of quick wins. And I think predominantly we see that in the planning and design of manufacturing plans. We see it in product design, customized product design, getting real-time simulation inputs while making changes to a design. And thirdly, in the domain of operator training and operator instructions, like real-life instructions. So the combination of VR and AR. And I think for all these three use cases, that continuity is in the end the element that will bring the true value. At Hannover Messe, we were able to show some initial demos. I think it's truly early stage still. I think it's also important to realize that we bring a lot of promises right now of what's possible, but it will take time before it really is possible.
Great. Thank you very much, Mathieu, and thank you to all of our panelists for the introductions. Now, let me just remind the audience that you can submit questions through the chat box, and I already saw a few, so please don't be shy. But let me kick off the discussion with a couple of pretty simple questions, but really not with very simple implications. And I'm excited to hear what you have to say about this. So firstly, what is the main obstacle or obstacles to the full rollout of the industrial metaverse? And also, as a follow-up, how will this affect your business model? So both how might the metaverse affect your business model, but also how might the obstacles affect your business model if you're not able to roll out as quickly as you can? And let me maybe go in reverse order, but if you want to jump in, please also do, because I'm keen to make this less a formal Q&A and more of a discussion, so a little bit more dynamic. So let me start with Mathieu and maybe go the other way back.
Yeah, that let me touch on these obstacles. I think a key obstacle, or at the same time opportunity, obviously, is the SaaS transition. And that's a thing that started, that we kicked off a couple of years ago across the board in Siemens. And without software as a service, we're not able to get it going. A second element is the APIs and accessibility of data sources and make that generally accessible. And thirdly, I think, and that's maybe where this all comes together, is interoperability. And if I refer back to my earlier introduction, I think the true value comes when we are able to take away these boundaries between different life cycle stages and disciplines. For that, we need to connect so many different data sources and also support data formats that are useful for the people that need to do the work that they need to do. That interoperability is currently an obstacle that we still need to overcome.
Thank you very much. And Greg, please.
Yeah, sure. I'll follow up on the SaaS point. Definitely one of the obstacles we saw was, and I'll sort of position this as the metaverse is quite distinct from just a digital twin. I think that you can't have a digital twin without a 3D experience of content. It's hard for me to imagine a metaverse without a 3D interaction. So one of the big challenges there, especially with the use cases we have, is how do you get very detailed, millions and millions of polygon complex 3D models to run and deliver real-time interactions in a 3D environment, in a VR headset at high frame rate, even on a laptop or a web browser. And so this for us was a real rethinking of how we deliver 3D geometry to an end user experience. And for that, and this is a bit of the interoperability thing too. We developed a way to consume a wide range of 3D formats from all over industry, different vendors, and then come up with a way to stream that geometry, those meshes, into the user experience, so that there is no loss of fidelity. There's no need to kind of go through an optimization routine, so that you can get basically users into that experience at high frame rate with as little effort as possible. So in other words, reducing the time from like a 3D model existing and then being, something that people can interact with in a metaverse experience is something we've had to confront. And that's really a mental shift from working with sending files, 3D files, to just making like an API connection and streaming complex 3D geometry into an application. So that's a really a bit of a technical thing. But I think if you don't solve that technical thing, then you'll never be able to deliver a smooth user experience. Yeah, I'll just mention that and pass it on.
Thank you. And I will definitely be coming back to interoperability because I see a few questions from the audience as well. But let's pass over to Simon first.
Thank you. I think everyone's really touched on a couple of the key ones here, but I might just add a couple of extra things that we've seen. If we assume that the industrial metaverse is a place where we can interact with all of the data from our digital twin, then our customers' preparedness for their digital twin is actually a time inhibitor. I think it's not every single one of our customers is creating a new process plant or a new factory today. Many of them are operating plants that are 50, 60, 70 years old. And their idea of an industrial metaverse is maybe quite different from ours. So there's a lot of human and investment cases that they need in order to put together a good digitalization strategy for their business before we can even dream about an industrial metaverse. I totally agree that there are some major, issues in front of us, but I think maybe the other one that is slowing us down, which we're all probably experiencing as experts on this call, is the noise in the market. It's incredibly diluting of the potential value of an industrial metaverse when there's so much noise about the idea of the metaverse, which is in a very different social context from the one that we're talking about. And it is quite inhibiting. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, in the next 6 to 12 months that noise disappears. But I think it's also on top of the technical issues. I think the reality is our customers have got to move along their digitalization journey quicker if they're to get excited about this opportunity.
Absolutely. And finally, Volker, please.
Yeah, building on what Simon, I think you rightfully just called noise. It's important we frame this correctly, right? It's about opportunity first and foremost. And I think one of the obstacles sometimes we face, Simona, especially here in Europe, is that we start with what are the obstacles rather than truly framing this from the opportunity side. And when I look at the opportunities, of course, it goes back to what you mentioned, life cycle implication. Yes, indeed. But then I think it goes even beyond life cycle. The radical opportunity that I see in the industrial context is really that we would link, and some of you had mentioned supply chain, but it's truly linking value chains beyond what we do today. And then there's a number of prerequisites as to how to make that happen. Some of them are of a technology nature, and some of these go beyond technology, data ownership, intellectual property rights. It's a lot of interesting opportunity, challenge and risk as well. Let's be clear. But first of all, opportunity. And then it ties into the business model part of your question, Simona. I'm really glad you asked that because there is huge opportunity with building multi-party ecosystems in ways we haven't seen yet, bringing players together, logistics production companies as a trivial example, right? When you look at trucks in Germany as an example, half of the trucks go empty. Doesn't need to be like that. I mean, it's a dumb example, but that's how to make it real. And then, of course, in a more sophisticated way, it ties into API regime, interoperability, and also the way we overcome fragmentation of data silos, by the way, within companies, but also across companies. So that probably is another interesting opportunity for change.
Absolutely. And thank you, everyone. So I promised I would go back to interoperability because it raised a few questions already. And one of the questions is, of course, on standards, which is often not an uncontroversial topic. Does interoperability require approved international standards? And then maybe as well, while we're already on standards, the other question that was submitted is, given that most of the AR, VR presentation and interaction systems are vertically integrated solutions, where and when are standards going to merge? So those two questions, and in no particular order, would anybody like to have a first shot?
Why don't I give it a first go? Sorry. Just touching on something that Greg mentioned earlier about this, I think sometimes when I think about standards, sometimes they emerge from standards bodies, consortia, industry groups, and sometimes they just emerge from a particular organization's determination. I'd say BIM as a standard model came from some serious determination from a number of technical organizations and then was adopted from a standards body. So I think we have to make sure that we take a pragmatic view. There's commercial opportunities for all of our businesses and probably many of people on the line here. And also that we need to run in parallel with standards bodies. So we need to adhere to standards when they emerge and when there's good agreement on them. But we also need to expect that technical organizations will move at pace in order to try to take advantage of the opportunity as well. So I think it's a blended mix. I wouldn't want to wait for there to be a Metaverse standard because we may miss a good opportunity.
No, and I think definitely if we, and as we define industrial metaverse more as an evolution than a revolution, there is many standards that are applicable. Sorry, I think I dropped off for a sec.
Yes, you're fine now. You're
back. All right. And so I think there is a lot of existing standards that are applicable for what we try to achieve in industrial metaverse. And I think there is not an immediate reason to wait for new standards before we can move, we can start or continue moving. So for me, it's not the standardization topic is not the core of interoperability for me.
Yeah, I just would follow up and agree on that. I think the key here is instead of waiting for just common language and a common set of standards, it's more about an openness to just APIs able to communicate with one another and perform necessary transformations of data from one source to another. So I think again we're sort of almost operating here at a software level in a communication level, API to API. And as long as there's openness between platforms to communicate and information, yeah, I think standards will emerge out of that, but I don't think we need to wait for one system to make a communication to another and exchange information in a bi-directional way. So I think they will emerge. I think standardizing a single file format probably will never actually work, or even an exchange protocol. I mean, you have IoT information communicating, you've got cameras that communicate information, there's sensors all over the place. You've got dozens and dozens of 3D file formats, and all that's built on top of the internet, HTTP and network protocols. Yeah, I think we just keep, it's about open-ended communication between systems is my point of view.
Yeah, openness is key. I agree, Greg. Nonetheless, I think we need standards to assure some basic level of interoperability, and maybe we just take that for granted, right? And when I look at olfactory example, wireless connectivity, you want to have that interoperability. Why? Because everybody benefits. Everybody benefits. It's an obvious point, and I think from a policy perspective, Simona, I think that's what you asked for. Also from this panel, this is a very interesting debate at this time. Why? Because let's make sure where standards are needed, they are industry led. At this moment in time, there's some policymakers who challenge that. I think they got it wrong. You cannot drive government top down what the standard should be. That will be really the wrong choice. Let me be very vocal about this. The other part, and that's very relevant also for European industry, is that when you look at standard regime, it also ties into patent regime. That's another point we should make, and it's important. Why? Because it's a way for European technology champions, we have some of these on the call, to recapture some of the investment value, right? So I think that's another point. Fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory patent regime. It ties into standardization, but without compromising on time to market and speed and flexibility. That absolutely I agree with. And last but not least, we don't need to standardize everything. I agree with that point as well.
Thank you for the
Just what you
segue
think of,
into the policy element. I was actually going to go into that there myself, because it's one of my favorite topics, as I work with policymakers on a daily basis, and I know there's a few on the call. So let me pose the question, and maybe starting with Volker, because you already started the thought, in case there's anything to add, and then moving to the other panelists. So what can governments and policymakers do to better foster innovation and adoption of those technologies? Just to give an example, again, the EU has commissioned a study and consultation into virtual worlds. Are there recommendations you might already be able to share on this call? And certainly, let's not limit ourselves to Europe. You know, these are metaverses that will be rolled out across the world. Perhaps there are regional differences, or perhaps there are broad general strokes or recommendations that you would recommend all policymakers to take into account.
Yeah, indeed, Simona. So I think the key, there's a couple of key elements for success, right? The one that really is important, and I think we are good at this, we have been in Europe, is the way public and private sector work together. So there is an educational piece, right, in a good way. An event like this, I mean, we learn from each other. It's good, right? And we need to make sure policymakers, we make time to sit down together and jointly discuss what is around the corner, and that is very important, making sure it is to the benefit of society and industry. So that I think is also important. Economic growth, yes, but also and sometimes that's overlooked, but nonetheless it's important. Aspects of sustainability, security, trustworthiness, privacy, right? When you look at digital twin of human body in the medical context, we want to get privacy right. So there's a lot of elements we need to jointly push for a higher level of value creation. And then the way we work together, just elaborating on this a little bit more, I think there's the funding piece, right? To fund joint research, joint prototyping, excellent. But then there's also this ecosystem building piece. I think it goes back to Alex's opening comment. It's the way we work together, not just in research, but across the value chain, building multi-party ecosystem. And how can the legal framework support that without, however, compromising on the values that we all believe in and we stand for, especially in Europe and the Western world. So that's how I would summarize this.
Thank you very much. And I think, Greg, you were about to say something and I interrupted you.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I just had this thought about like just the subject of like open source versus like a black box, and sort of this whole discussion that's emerged around OpenAI and ChatGPT, and then there's a whole nother subject, which is what happens when you really the intersection of AI, large language models with the metaverse and with digital twins. And I think this is where policy does become interesting. If it's one thing to talk about engineers and architects, and we're in there as humans building these things, and but at some point, right, all this data is going to exist. It's going to be subject to machine learning algorithms and AI, and I think there is a question there from a policy perspective. Is I'm sort of coming from the infrastructure perspective, right? The bridges, the roads, like the public infrastructure landscape. Is what does it mean if AI can access all these digital twins and these metaverse models? Is there a security threat there? What happens is if AI has access to all of our critical infrastructure and energy networks and grids, I think it's something to be aware of from a privacy perspective, and just to see the role AI plays in how new infrastructure and architecture even comes about and getting built in the world around us. So I think there has to be maybe some governance and thought about the role of AI in that industrial metaverse. So I just want to mention that point. A very different kind of point of view, like and maybe just like open source versus the black box conversation. And I know there's a lot of questions right now over the black box nature of what ChatGPT is able to do. So I just want to throw that out there.
Thanks so much. And just Simon, on the governance policymaker point.
Yeah, I see in the chat there's also a reference made to Gaia X, and we are very strongly involved in that and in the Catena X implementation, and now also in defining the Manufacturing X follow-up. So these are projects that are partly funded by governments and European money, and I think this is important, right? That we can accelerate with public investment, and if we want to keep the lead, and there's many domains where we lost the lead in Europe. I think industrialization and industrial automation is definitely a domain where we are in the lead and where we can keep that position. And the industrial metaverse is an opportunity to accelerate on that. So for me, programs like these are a good instrument that the policymakers have to ensure that we keep the lead as European players here.
Nothing specific to add here. I think everybody's covered it. I'm interested in Greg's point raising about AI, which of course is an interesting discussion here. I think there's a question maybe just to test our resilience here is, do we have policies in place for how we use Microsoft Teams and Zoom, for example, which are common day-to-day collaboration tools where we share some of our data, and also obviously we share our conversations and our web screen footage, which is somewhere stored on a server. For me, that passage of time has passed where we're already comfortable with this level of collaboration. And since I think we regard the metaverse as a richer environment for collaboration, on top of that, the policies around that, I think maybe being optimistic or positive, that's maybe some of those data protection policies, maybe some of those cyber techniques are already in place for us to reuse this. And also thinking back a little bit to how this is posed for us is ultimately, if you think about the gaming industry over the last 30 or 40 years, where multiplayer environments have existed for a long, long time, with lots of people coming together to achieve objectives within a gaming environment, that concept of multiplayer is a highly reusable concept here in an industrial context. And I think maybe the policies need to be firmed up when we work with each other professionally rather than in a gaming context, if you see what I mean.
Absolutely. I think lots of good recommendations there. I do want to come back to the concept of digital twins, because I said we would in the beginning. And there is a question on that. But in general, I'd like to kick off with Mathieu, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about some of the digital twin work you are doing. And I will also pose the question that came in through the chat box. Are there any reference frameworks to overlay data layers onto a digital twin for different what-if scenarios? So we'd be interested in this, but also any general remarks as well.
All right, yeah. So I think the digital twin is something that is that we work on for decades, right? This is not new, and this is many evolutionary steps. I've personally had a strong focus always on the physics-based simulation element in digital twins, but I think predominantly right now it's a data-driven exercise and much more about connecting heterogeneous data sources and derive meaningful perspectives out of that. So I read the question in the chat, but I could not really translate it into a concrete answer, to be honest. Maybe there's other people in the panel that have a strong opinion on this, but could not put it in a context that I can sketch a good answer to that. To
No,
that
I think
question.
one way to sketch the answer, Matthew, is building exactly what you said. It's a data-driven paradigm. It ties into analytics and now increasingly predictive analytics. And therefore, as per your question, Simona, scenarios of evolution. And the cool thing is it goes beyond what you can see, right? Let's keep that in mind. We are talking dimensions of scenario building that go beyond the physical. Right, and that's also where now policy kicks in. How now, again, in the medical context, it's probably the most obvious. There's some dystopian scenarios you want to avoid, right? Tying into privacy, user data being protected, that's a starting point. But also, like, what is ethical to play with? What kind of scenario would you still allow when you, right? So that in the industrial context, it's comparatively easy because we are motivated by being more efficient, faster time to market, more secure. So let's maybe stick to industry in that sense. It's more straightforward, but the key question still is the relevant one. So predictive AI kicking in scenarios, and it's a lot of value in that, and especially when tying it again into the multi-party ecosystem aspect and cross value chain, right? That's where it'll be extremely powerful and to the benefit of the planet, being more efficient, effective with the resources we have.
Yeah. I'd just add to that maybe that I think we have a fairly simplistic view about the digital twin at Aviva. That's flattering, by the way. It's pretty much every data that you can get your hand on, which is about the asset that you're operating. So it's PDF files, it's specification documents, it's video footage from the plant or the asset itself, it's sensor data streamed every single second, it's drawings that were made 40, 50 years ago. It's absolutely everything that you can get your hands on that represents the working operation that you have, kept up to date for as much as you can on a daily basis. And if that's the basic concept of a digital twin, then obviously that's something that, like Matthew mentioned, Aviva have been working on for decades. It's not uncomplicated, and it takes our customers quite some time to work through this in order to consolidate into something they call truth, their digital twin. And that is just the essential foundation, in our view, of anything to do with industrial metaverse, because without it, it is just a game.
Yeah, I'll comment on that too. Very similar, I think, as we operate in the, sort of before operations, the whole like construction phase of an asset. And our view is also that you, on one hand, you have the design model. That's the planned, like optimal design. But then increasingly, we're seeing the digital twin is what happens when you start to update. What's actually happening in the field and capturing the real state of the asset. Where was that being actually installed, and on what date, and what quality? And I'm seeing increased development of technology that's just increasing the frequency in which reality capture can be used, in the real world to then update that digital asset, whether that's 360 photography, laser scanning, photogrammetry, etc. So seeing like the almost like the birth of the digital twin is like, starts with that sort of the moment you start building the asset, and then after it exists, it's everything else that affects that asset. And almost trying to get an entire history of a single component from its design stage all the way through to decommissioning, and eventually gets recycled and put back into a circular economy.
Yeah, but then to add to that, Greg, I think the key element that simulation then brings is the future perspective, right? So it's definitely collecting all that historic data and driving insights based on historic data. But I think the true power is in using that historic data to validate models that help you predict future states and drive decision making based on scenarios and potential accurately simulated future states of being to take as an input in the decision making.
Kick in.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and AI is then very strongly data driven typically, and looking at patterns, where I think physics-based simulation can be an extra layer, right? An extra value on top of the pure data mining results. Yeah.
Thank you very much, and excited about the discussion. We only have a few minutes left, unfortunately, and lots of questions from the audience. So first of all, thank you very much for all the questions. In case we certainly won't get to all of them now, but we will share these with the speakers after the event as well, and hopefully we can do a report or some sort of follow-up, because lots of good thoughts there. I would like to perhaps end with one question that's certainly not groundbreaking or very new, but something that's relevant for a lot of the industry actors. And maybe you could also wrap it up with your final remarks as well, sort of about 1 minute each. Skills, age-old question. You know, do you have enough access to talent? And if not, you know, what is it that you require to make the metaverse happen? And again, is this talent metaverse specific, industrial metaverse specific, or are we looking at talent again as we have with sort of pre-metaverse technologies, you know, AI engineers, construction, etc.? Do we break it down into the constituent pieces? So maybe again we could start in the order that we started in the beginning. So it would be Volker, Simon, Greg, and then Mathieu, if that works for everyone.
Yeah, with pleasure. Thank you, Simona. So I think it all starts with framing relevant opportunities, relevant problems we want to solve. The skill challenge, as we currently have, especially also in Europe, I think is partially due to the fact that some in the young generation, and maybe not so young as well, don't understand how important the value scenarios are. And we've actually on the chat, there were some good questions like, how does the metaverse help with net zero energy efficiency? It's exactly one of the key questions to ask, right? In the factories, I mean, one of the motivating factors, some people argue, yes, TCO, when you give this a closer look, it ties into energy consumption, big time. Metaverse can help with that. Security, another big topic, similarly. So summarizing, we need to make sure we tie this into relevant problems to be solved. And some of the skill problems with the next generation, I hope we can help mitigate that way if we reach out, go to the schools, universities, and talk about it. Make sure people understand. And maybe there's some even in our generation, now looking at some of the co-panelists, who, you know, we need to engage in making this visible. Thanks, Simona.
And maybe reflect that this is a slightly interesting one, because the AI world does require, to some degree, quite a lot of computer science or data science skills in order to get those models, you know, kicked off. So there was a discussion maybe a year ago where we had a shortage of computer scientists and data scientists, and that conversation seems to have gone away. In an industrial metaverse, I think we'll have a surplus of skills, because pretty much anyone who's over 37 years of age, which apparently is the average age of a gamer on the planet, anyone who's over 37 will be a 3D native. At the age of 12, 10, they'll have been sitting behind a console in a 3D environment in full context of the objectives of that thing they're playing. In the context of a digital industrial world, that 3D navigation, the moving around, the interacting in a 3D space will be increasingly, it's so natural to them and so rich for their collaborations. So I don't think I see the industrial metaverse as an opportunity for shortage, but that question about net zero, we really have to touch on. I do think that there are many opportunities for us to do things to help our customers to reduce carbon, but most of it comes from good decision making and access to accurate data. So much as Mathieu is talking about with simulations, you can make improvements and optimization in a metaverse context when you've got good simulation data. We have customers who ask us to use predictive analysis, AI tools on top of their historian data to avoid natural gas flares that happen when they're depressurizing the systems. So there's all kinds of ways of reducing carbon emission by interacting more richly in a metaverse environment.
Great, thank you very much. I think we might have lost Greg, so while he joins back, maybe Mathieu, you could go next, please. Oh, there's some technical difficulties there. Let's see if it works, but if not, we will wrap it up. But certainly this will not be the end of the discussion, because we're very encouraged by the I guess, the pace and the interest from the audience, and then the insights from the panelists. So I think, Mathieu, you're struggling a little bit with the audio, so that's okay. But let me then bring the panel to the end. And thank you so much, Simon, Mathieu, Greg, and Volker, for the very, very insightful discussion. One of the most animated, I think, we've had in the Metaverse series here. And again, as I mentioned before, please do submit your questions in the question bank if we didn't get to them, and we will try to follow up. But thank you so much for the attendees as well, and have a good rest of the day.